I found out my wife Jeanette bought a house with another man using money I had been saving for 11 years. And when I confronted her family about it, her brother Zachary told me I was born to be stepped on. Her mother Lily said I should just disappear quietly and stop embarrassing myself. They said this to my face in their living room, while Jeanette sat there nodding along like I was the one who had done something wrong. Let me back up because you need to understand who these people are and why they felt so comfortable destroying my life. I met Jeanette when we were both 23. I was working at a distribution center, grinding through 12-hour shifts, and she was finishing up community college. We got married after 2 years of dating, and I thought we were building something real. Her family never liked me much from the start. Lily made comments about how I didn't come from much, how my parents were divorced, how I rented instead of owned. Zachary used to make jokes about my job being blue-collar, asking when I was going to get a real career. I let it slide because I loved Jeanette, and I figured once I proved myself, they would come around. I worked overtime constantly. I picked up weekend shifts. I ate cheap food and drove my 2009 Mazda until it had 200,000 miles on it. Every extra dollar went into a savings account I had opened specifically to buy us a home someday. Jeanette knew about this account. She had access to it because I trusted her completely. That was my mistake, apparently. 11 years. 11 years. Do you understand what kind of discipline that takes? This man ate rice and beans while his coworkers went out for drinks. He drove a car that probably made sounds no mechanic could identify. He said no to himself every single day for over a decade because he believed in a future with this woman. And the whole time, her family is sitting there making jokes about his job like he's not literally sacrificing his present for their daughter's future. The disrespect was always there. He just loved her too much to see it. 3 months ago, I was organizing some documents at home because we were supposed to start looking at houses together. That was the plan we had discussed for years. I needed our joint account statements, and while I was logging into our bank, I noticed the savings account balance looked wrong. Way wrong. Like $87,000 wrong. I sat there staring at the screen for probably 15 minutes, just refreshing the page thinking it had to be some kind of error. Then I pulled up the transaction history and saw a series of large withdrawals over the past 8 months. 20,000 here, 15,000 there, all transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I called the bank and they confirmed the transfers were authorized by Jeanette using her credentials. When I asked Jeanette about it that night, she didn't even try to lie at first. She just got this look on her face like she was annoyed I had found out. She told me the money went towards securing our future and that I needed to trust her. I kept pushing, and she finally admitted she had been helping her friend Landon with a real estate investment. An investment. With my savings that took me over a decade to build. I asked her what kind of investment, and she got defensive, saying I was always so paranoid and controlling about money. I told her I wanted details, and she eventually admitted that she and Landon had purchased a property together, a house. She had put my savings toward the down payment on a house that she and another man now co-owned. I asked her why Landon's name was on this property and not mine. She said it was complicated, and that Landon had better credit, and it made more sense for the loan approval. I asked her if she was having an affair with him, and she rolled her eyes and said I was being ridiculous and that Landon was just a friend who understood investments better than I did. So I did what any rational person would do. I went to the county assessor's website and looked up property records. I found the house. Jeanette and Landon were listed as joint owners. The purchase date was 6 months ago. The address was in a nicer part of town than anywhere we had ever lived together. I drove to that address the next morning while Jeanette was at work. It was a 3-bedroom house with a landscaped yard and a new fence. Landon's car was in the driveway. I sat in my car across the street for about an hour just processing what I was looking at. My money, my years of sacrifice, turned into a house for my wife and some other guy. I didn't confront Landon that day. I went home and I waited. I needed to think. See, that right there is what separates people who get revenge from people who just get mad. Most people would have walked up to that door and started swinging. And honestly, completely understandable. But this man sat in his car, looked at the life that was stolen from him, and made a decision. He chose strategy over emotion. He chose patience over satisfaction. That hour in the car wasn't weakness. That was a man loading a weapon nobody could see. What happened next is why I am posting this. I told Jeanette I knew about the house and that I wanted to talk to her family about what was going on. She got nervous and said there was no need to involve her mother and brother. I insisted. Looking back, I think I was hoping her family would be shocked too, that they would side with me. That this was something Jeanette had done behind everyone's back. I was so naive. We went to Lily's house that Sunday. Jeanette had obviously talked to them before we arrived, because nobody seemed surprised when I brought up the house and the money. Lily just sat there with this smug expression while I explained that Jeanette had taken $87,000 from our savings without my consent. Zachary actually laughed. He said I should have seen this coming, that anyone who hands over that kind of access to their money deserves whatever happens to them. I asked Lily if she knew about this beforehand, and she said, of course she did, that Jeanette had been planning her exit strategy for over a year, that Landon was a better match for her daughter anyway. She called him ambitious. She said I had peaked at 25 and was never going to give Jeanette the life she deserved. Zachary kept piling on. He told me I was the kind of man women practice on before finding someone real. He said his sister had been patient with me for years, and I should be grateful she stayed as long as she did. He asked me what exactly I thought I was going to do about any of this, and when I didn't answer immediately, he said that's what he thought. He told me some people are born to be stepped on, and I had that energy. Lily told me to go home, sign whatever divorce papers Jeanette's lawyer sent me, and die quietly instead of making this harder than it needed to be. She said nobody would believe my side anyway, and that fighting would only humiliate me further. I looked at all three of them sitting there so confident that they had won. Jeanette wouldn't even make eye contact with me. And something happened in that moment. I felt completely calm. I actually smiled, which made Zachary ask what was so funny. I told him nothing was funny, and that I appreciated them being so honest with me about how they really felt. They looked uncomfortable after that, like my reaction wasn't what they expected. Lily told me to leave, and I did. That was 3 months ago. They think I have been wallowing in defeat this whole time. They think I signed the divorce papers their lawyer sent and that I am just going to disappear like Lily suggested. They have no idea what I have been doing. They have no idea what is coming. I am posting this because I need to get it out somewhere, and also because I want a record of how this started before everything happens. If you are still reading, the next update is going to cover what I discovered about the house situation that changes everything, and the first move I made that none of them saw coming. Die quietly. Let that phrase sink in for a second. This woman looked at a man who spent 11 years building a future for her daughter and told him to die quietly. Not, we're sorry it came to this. Not, maybe we can work something out. Die quietly. And Zachary with the born to be stepped on line. You know he practiced that. You know he was waiting for a chance to say something he thought sounded cool. These people weren't just cruel, they were performatively cruel. They enjoyed it. They wanted him to leave that house feeling like nothing. And here's the thing about people who punch down with that much confidence. They never, ever consider what happens when the person they're kicking decides to stand up. That smile he gave them? That calm? Zachary should have recognized that energy. That was the smile of a man who just got handed a gift, because they showed him exactly who they were and freed him from any guilt about what comes next. Update 1. Okay, so a lot of people asked for an update, and I need to get this out because things escalated faster than I expected. Quick recap. My wife Jeanette took $87,000 from our savings to buy a house with another man named Landon. Her family knew about it. Her brother Zachary told me I was born to be stepped on. Her mother Lily told me to die quietly. That was 3 months ago. Here is what I have been doing. First thing after leaving Lily's house was driving to my father Albert's place. He lives 40 minutes outside town in a small house he bought after my parents divorced. I told him everything and he asked one question. Was I going to let them get away with it or make them regret every word? I told him I was going to make them regret it. He said good. Then he explained something important. The savings account was opened during our marriage, which meant the money was legally marital property. And marital property transferred to a third party without spousal consent is something courts take very seriously. I spent weeks researching marital asset dissipation. I pulled all the bank statements and property records. The house cost $420,000. Down payment was $90,000, mostly my money. But here is what changed everything. The property records showed a lien from a private lender. Lily had taken out a personal loan using her house as collateral and loaned that money to Jeanette and Landon for closing costs. Zachary was listed as guarantor. This wasn't just Jeanette running off with some guy. This was a family project. They all invested in helping Jeanette leave me in style using my money as the foundation. Lily put her house up. Zachary signed as guarantor. These geniuses were so confident this man would just roll over that they literally tied their entire family's financial future to this scheme. They didn't just steal from him. They went all in on the assumption that he was nobody. They bet their homes on his weakness. And now that bet is about to come due. This is like watching someone taunt a guy they think can't fight while standing on a trapdoor they installed. I did not sign their divorce papers. I hired my own attorney and filed first. My petition included a claim for dissipated marital assets and a request to either award me my share of the house or force a sale. When Jeanette got served, she called me 17 times in one day. I let her panic for a few hours before answering. She tried sounding reasonable, saying we could work something out without courts. I asked if she thought about keeping things simple before stealing my savings. She said it wasn't stealing because we were married, and it was joint money. I told her joint money means we both decide how it gets spent, and she didn't ask me if I wanted to buy land and a house. Then she tried a different approach. Landon was willing to buy out my share for $40,000 if I dropped everything. I laughed and said that was less than half of what she took. Absolutely not. She got angry and said I was being vindictive. I told her I had 11 years of bank statements showing where that money came from and where it went. I had property records with her name next to her boyfriend's. I knew about her mother's loan and her brother being guarantor. My attorney was very interested in all of it. She said I had no idea what I was starting. I told her I said, actually, I know exactly what I am starting, and I have been planning it since her family told me to die quietly. 6 weeks later, Jeanette showed up at our old apartment unannounced. She spent an hour trying to convince me that court would ruin us both financially. I let her talk and took mental notes on everything she revealed about their situation. The mortgage payments are higher than anticipated. Landon's income is not stable. They are struggling with monthly payments. Lily has been asking when this will be resolved because she is nervous about her loan. Lily's payments were based on Jeanette and Landon refinancing within a year to pay her back. That is not happening now. I told Jeanette her problems were not my concern. She created this when she decided my decade of sacrifice was funding for her new life. She tried saying we both made mistakes. I asked her to name one mistake I made. She said I focused too much on saving money. I asked if that justified stealing from her. She had no answer. Here's what she doesn't know. I have been talking to a real estate attorney about partition actions. Because my money funded part of the down payment during our marriage, I may have a claim to force a sale of that house even though my name isn't on the deed. Separate from divorce proceedings, a direct action against the property. Zachary found out somehow because he showed up at my job last week, waited in the parking lot until my shift ended. He was not laughing anymore. He told me forcing a sale would destroy his mother financially. Lily could lose her own home. I reminded him what he said in his mother's living room, asked if he remembered telling me to die quietly. He didn't answer. I told him his family made a choice to humiliate me when they thought I was powerless, and now they were going to learn what happens when the person they stepped on stands back up. He called me vindictive garbage and walked away. Court date is in 3 weeks. But here is what keeps me up at night. Landon has been completely silent through all of this. No contact. No negotiation attempts. Nothing. Either he doesn't care about losing the house or he has something planned I don't know about yet. I focus too much on saving money. She said that. That was her answer when asked what mistake he made. He saved too much. He was too responsible. He sacrificed too hard for their future. That's not an accusation, Jeanette. That's a confession. You just admitted you had nothing legitimate to complain about and had to reach for. He cared too much about our future as a criticism. And Zachary showing up at his job, waiting in the parking lot to intimidate him? 3 months ago, this family was laughing at this man. Now Zachary is doing stakeouts, begging him to stop. The energy shift is beautiful. Also, love that he's keeping receipts on every conversation, every admission, every detail about their financial struggles. This man is building a case while they're building excuses. Update 2. The court date happened, and I need to tell you what went down because it was better than I could have planned. Quick recap for anyone just joining. Wife Jeanette stole $87,000 from our savings to buy a house with another man named Landon. Her family knew and humiliated me when I found out. I filed for divorce with claims for dissipated marital assets and started looking into partition actions to force a sale of the house. So the hearing was last Thursday. It was supposed to be a preliminary thing, mostly procedural. Both attorneys presenting their positions and the judge setting timelines. But Jeanette and her whole family showed up like they were ready for war. Lily sat in the back row with Zachary. Landon was there too. First time I had seen him since I drove past the house months ago. The interesting part was watching their body language. Jeanette sat with her attorney on one side of the courtroom. Landon sat separately, near the back. Not next to Lily and Zachary, but not close to Jeanette either. Something was off between them, and I could tell. My attorney presented the case clearly. Marital funds transferred without consent during the marriage to purchase property with a third party. Bank records showing the source of funds. Property records showing ownership. The judge asked Jeanette's attorney how they intended to respond, and there was a lot of talk about marital property being jointly owned and Jeanette having equal right to use it. My attorney countered that equal right to use does not mean equal right to give away to a boyfriend. The judge set a discovery deadline and scheduled another hearing in 6 weeks. Standard stuff. But what happened after we left the courtroom is what matters. I was walking to my car in the parking structure when Landon approached me. This was the guy who had been completely silent for months, and suddenly he wanted to talk. He said we should have a conversation man to man without the lawyers and family drama. I asked him why I would want to do that. He said because he had information that could help me and hurt Jeanette equally. Now, I am not stupid. I knew this could be some kind of setup. But I also knew that if there was tension between Landon and Jeanette, I wanted to understand it. So I told him I would listen, but I was not agreeing to anything. Here is what Landon told me. The house was never supposed to be permanent. Jeanette's plan was to stay there for 2 years, build equity, then sell and use the profit to buy something better. Landon was supposed to be bought out at that point. He was essentially providing his credit score and income verification for the mortgage in exchange for a cut of the eventual profit. The whole arrangement was Lily's idea. But now, with my legal claims threatening to force a sale or tie up the property in litigation for years, that plan was falling apart. Landon said he had already put significant money into the house for repairs and upgrades, expecting a return that might never come. He said Jeanette had been avoiding his messages for 2 weeks, and Lily had stopped taking his calls entirely. I asked him why he was telling me this. He said because if I was going to destroy their little scheme anyway, he might as well get something out of it. He wanted to know if there was a way we could work together to force a quick sale and split whatever equity existed before Jeanette and Lily found a way to drag this out for years. I told him I would think about it. I had no intention of partnering with this guy, but I wanted to see how desperate he was. That night, Jeanette texted me asking if I had talked to Landon. I confirmed I had. She called immediately and was furious. She kept saying Landon was trying to manipulate the situation and that I should not trust anything he told me. I asked her if it was true that the whole arrangement was Lily's idea. She hesitated before saying her mother was just trying to help her build a better future. I asked her if that future was supposed to include me at any point, or if I was always just the funding source. She did not answer directly. Instead, she said things had gotten complicated, and she never meant for it to go this far. I asked her what exactly she thought would happen when she took my money. Did she think I would just accept it? She said honestly yes, she thought I would be upset but eventually move on because that is what I always did. I just accepted things and kept working. And there it was. The real reason her family felt so comfortable destroying me. They saw me as someone who endures, someone who takes whatever happens and keeps going. They counted on my passivity, and when I stopped being passive, they had no idea what to do. I told Jeanette that version of me died in her mother's living room when Zachary told me I was born to be stepped on. I told her the man she married would have accepted this and disappeared. But she killed that man, and now she had to deal with whoever was left. She started crying and asking if there was any way to fix this. I said the only way to fix it was to give me back the 11 years I spent saving that money. Since she could not do that, we were going to court. 2 days later, Lily called me directly. First time she had contacted me since telling me to die quietly. Her tone was completely different now. No smugness, no superiority. She said this situation had gotten out of hand and that she was willing to personally compensate me if I dropped the partition action against the house. She offered me $60,000 paid over 2 years. I told her $60,000 was still less than what was taken, and I was not interested in payment plans. She said she did not have that kind of money liquid. I said that sounded like a her problem. She got angry and said I was going to regret making an enemy of her family. I reminded her that her family made an enemy of me when they told me to die quietly, and now she was seeing the consequences. She hung up. 4 hours later, Zachary showed up at my apartment building. He did not come to my door. He just sat in his car in the parking lot for about an hour before driving away. Something is about to break. I can feel it. Landon flipping is the most predictable betrayal in this entire story, and I'm honestly surprised it took this long. This man was never Jeanette's partner. He was a tool. He provided the credit score. He was supposed to get a payout, and now that the scheme is falling apart, Lily and Jeanette are ghosting him like he's a bad Tinder date. They use this man exactly like they used OP, just in a different way. And now he's coming to the actual victim trying to cut a side deal because he realizes he's about to lose everything too. Beautiful. Also, she thought I would be upset but eventually move on because that is what I always did. There it is. They didn't miscalculate because they were stupid. They miscalculated because they confused his patience for weakness, his reliability for spinelessness, his love for stupidity. Every time he let a comment slide, every time he didn't fight back against Zachary's jokes, they took it as evidence that he couldn't fight back. They never considered that he was choosing not to. And now, Lily's offering $60,000 in installments like she's negotiating a used car deal. Woman, your family's entire financial structure is built on a foundation of money you stole. You don't get to set terms. Final update. It is over. The house sold last Friday. And I watched every single one of them fall apart exactly the way I imagined during those 3 months of silence. Let me tell you how it all collapsed. After Zachary sat in my parking lot that night, things moved fast. Landon filed his own legal action against Jeanette and Lily. He claimed they had misrepresented the terms of their arrangement and that he was owed compensation for improvements he made to the property. Suddenly, there were 3 separate legal claims against the same house: mine, Landon's, and the original mortgage lender, who was getting nervous about all the litigation. The mortgage company sent Jeanette and Landon a notice that they were in technical default because of the competing liens and legal actions. They had 90 days to resolve the situation, or the bank would begin foreclosure proceedings. That notice changed everything. Jeanette called me in a panic. She was talking fast and her voice was shaking. She said we needed to settle immediately because if the bank foreclosed, everyone would lose everything. I told her that sounded like exactly what I wanted. She said I did not understand, and that if the house went to foreclosure, her mother would lose her home too because of the loan she took out. I said I understood perfectly, and that was the point. She asked me what I actually wanted. I told her I wanted every dollar I put into that account returned to me. I wanted her to admit in the divorce settlement that she transferred marital assets without consent, and I wanted her family to know that I was the one who destroyed their little scheme. She said there was no way to get me all the money back because most of it was tied up in the house. I said then I guess Lily better figure out how to come up with the difference. Jeanette started crying and saying I was being cruel. I reminded her what her family said to me. I asked her if she thought it was cruel when her brother told me I was born to be stepped on. I asked if it was cruel when her mother told me to die quietly. She had no response. 2 weeks later, Lily requested a meeting, not at her house this time. She wanted to meet at a restaurant in town, neutral territory. I agreed because I wanted to see her face when she realized she had lost. Lily looked older than I remembered, tired. She sat across from me and said she was prepared to make this right. She said she had spoken with Zachary and they had figured out a way to pay me back the full $87,000, half now and half within 6 months. In exchange, I would drop the partition action and agree to a quick divorce settlement with no further claims. I asked where the money was coming from. She said Zachary was taking out a loan against his own condo. She said the family was pooling resources because the alternative was losing everything. I looked at her and asked if she remembered what she said to me in her living room all those months ago. She did not answer. I said she told me to die quietly. I said her son told me I was born to be stepped on. And now here she was asking me to accept a payment plan so her family would not suffer consequences. She said people say things they do not mean when they are stressed. I told her that was interesting because when her family said those things to me, they seemed very relaxed, very confident, very certain that I was too weak to do anything. Lily asked me what else I wanted. I said I wanted her to admit that this whole scheme was her idea, that she encouraged Jeanette to take my money and set up house with Landon, that she risked her own home because she was so sure I would never fight back. She sat there for a long time before saying yes, it was her idea. She thought I was holding Jeanette back and that Landon represented a better future. She thought I would accept the situation and disappear like she told me to. I asked her how that worked out. She did not answer. I accepted the settlement. $87,000 returned to me. Zachary had to leverage his own property to make it happen. The divorce was finalized with a clear statement that Jeanette transferred marital assets without consent. The house went on the market to satisfy Landon's claims and the mortgage company's concerns. It sold last Friday for less than they paid because of the rushed timeline. Jeanette walked away with nothing. Landon walked away with barely enough to cover what he put in. Lily kept her house, but only because her children went into debt to save it. On the day the sale closed, I got a text from Jeanette. Just one line. She asked if I was happy now. I did not respond. But I did drive by Lily's house that evening. Just once. Zachary's car was in the driveway. I could see through the window that they were all inside. Jeanette was sitting on the couch holding her phone with both hands shaking. Zachary was pacing and yelling, probably at someone on the phone. And Lily was standing in the middle of the room pointing at Jeanette and clearly screaming at her own daughter. The woman who told me to die quietly was now tearing her family apart because their perfect scheme collapsed. I drove home and slept better than I had in months. My dad Albert asked me last week if I felt like I got what I wanted. I told him I got my money back and I got to watch them destroy each other. He asked if that was enough. I said I spent 11 years building something they stole in 8 months. Getting the money back does not give me those years. But watching Lily blame Jeanette, watching Zachary scramble to save his mother's house, watching Jeanette lose everything she schemed for, that felt like balance. They thought I was someone who could be stepped on. They found out they were wrong. I'm not posting any more updates. This chapter is closed. But I wanted to finish this record so anyone else going through something similar knows that you do not have to accept what people do to you. You do not have to die quietly. Sometimes you smile calmly and wait for your moment. And then you take everything back. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. Stressed? Lily, your family was laughing. Zachary made a whole monologue about how this man was born to be stepped on. You told him to die quietly like you were giving directions to a parking garage. Nobody was stressed. You were all comfortable. That's what made it so evil. You were relaxed in your cruelty because you genuinely believed he couldn't do anything about it. And now, you're sitting across from him at a restaurant trying to rewrite history because the consequences finally showed up. And that final image. Lily screaming at Jeanette through the window while Zachary paces and the whole family implodes. They didn't just lose the money, they lost each other. Because that's what happens when your relationships are built on shared contempt for someone else. The moment that person fights back, you've got nothing holding you together except blame. Lily blames Jeanette for getting caught. Jeanette blames Lily for the plan. Zachary blames everyone because he had to leverage his condo to clean up a mess he didn't create, but definitely encouraged. The scheme was never sustainable. It required the victim to stay a victim forever. And they were so confident in their judgment of his character that they bet their financial futures on it. They lost that bet.